I'm not going to stand here in front of one of the great wonders of the world and argue about an old movie. I'll go back inside. If you figure out some plan to make $800 last a lifetime, knock on the door. I'll be in there.
You're listening to the Keeping Your Money Show with Jamie Westenbarger and Bart Steinler.
All right, welcome back to the Keeping Your Money Show. Jamie Westenbarger, joined as always by Bart Steinler. For just tuning in, we basically told you why you should not take money out of your retirement for anything other than retirement, and why you should definitely have life insurance if you don't. It's such a no-brainer. I mean, it really is. We're not going to sit here and say, if you're a 35-year-old male, but I mean, folks, I'm 42 years old. I have a couple $1 million worth of life insurance, and I spend a couple $100 a month on it. We're talking huge differences between having that and not having that if something happened to me for my children, right?
I was at a dinner a couple years ago, and we had like 6 people at the table. We didn't really know each other, and the woman next to me was, asking me what I did, and I told her, and she said, "Well, do you deal with life insurance also?" I said, "Yeah, we do." And she goes, "Oh my God." She goes, "Most people don't realize how important that is." And she went on to tell me a story. Her husband didn't want to buy life insurance, but he was part of this. He was a partner in this business, and his partners told him it's an absolute necessity. You have to have it, and so on and so forth. So he finally, gave in and got the life insurance, and it was a couple $1 million worth. He died a few years later, very unexpectedly. Nobody saw it coming. And the woman told me that it made such a difference in her life. She goes, "I would have had to move if not for the life insurance. I would not have been able to put my kids through college except for the life insurance." Said, "My whole life would have just come crumbling down."
Yep.
She goes, "But the money that from that life insurance allowed me, through the grief that I was going through, allowed me to maintain my standard of living, allowed me to keep my family together, allowed us to keep going on." And,
Well, the thing with that too, Bart, is I think a lot of times people are like, well, why would I leave $1 million to, well, if you're in your 30s and you're making a reasonable salary, what do you think it's going to cost to replace your income, even for the next 10 years, to send your kids to college, to make sure the house gets paid off? Like you have serious monetary commitments over the next couple decades that if you're not there to meet those, that's going to be something that your spouse and children need.
Yeah, let's say you're making $80,000 a year and you have $1 million worth of life insurance and you pass away. That $1 million is probably going to replace about $45,000 to $50,000 worth of your income. It's not even going to replace the $80,000.
Well, if you tried to make it replace the $80,000, it's not going to replace it for the rest of your children's childhood.
Right.
I mean, it's going to run out before then.
Right. So
yeah. But again, if you need a quote, give us a call. 888-98-MONEY is the number. All right, so we got this new act that's been passed by the House. Senate is expected to take it up. They kind of have their own, so they're going to probably mishmash them and come up with something that's completely worthless in the long run. But in the meantime, they have...
Try to be optimistic, Jamie.
Come on, that's what happens. All the stuff that's actually worthwhile ends up just being gone. But in the House version, there are some things in here that really could have impact on those of you listening. And so I thought they were worth at least talking about. We would obviously talk about them in more detail if the Senate does either approve this or if there's a modified version that they both agree to. A couple of them, though, are things that, have been discussed for a long time that finally someone is, addressing. The first is increasing the required minimum distribution age. We increase the Social Security full retirement age. We increase the average age when someone retires. We see people working longer and longer. Yet at 70 and a half, we keep telling them they have to take their money out. They're talking about moving it to 72. The Senate's version is to move it to 75, which I think is even better personally. The one thing that we see is much more likely to see this become realistic. Another version that's been kicked around that I like a lot is actually exempting smaller accounts from this. So if all you had was an IRA and it had $100,000 in it, you wouldn't be required ever to take an RMD because it wasn't a certain, which, the whole point of saving money for retirement is so you have it. If we start making people take money out of their retirement at 70 and a half, we do increase the likelihood that they'll run out.
Right.
So it's not a good system, really.
And you have more and more people living, well into their 90s, so that money has to last quite a few years. So if they're not tapping into it until they're 75, they have a better chance of having that money last than if they're tapping into it when it's 70.
Yep.
Another thing, I hope when they decide between 72 and 75 that they just make it an even number.
Yes.
And not come out like
I know.
it's 70 and a half right now. So hopefully they don't come out with some ridiculous number like it's going to be 74 and a half or 72 and 3/4 or
Right.
some ridiculous thing like that, which it just adds confusion to people trying to figure it out.
Yep. To tie into that, removing the age limitation on IRA contributions, again, acknowledging people are working later. Why are we penalizing them and not letting them continue to save for their retirement just because they've hit some magical age that has been rudimentarily set aside by the government? Tax credit for auto enrollment could be nice. It's offering companies a tax credit if they set up automatic enrollment. There's some options for smaller employers to potentially tie in together to form retirement plans. One thing I love seeing in this was the government's acknowledgement of the value of an annuity, and saying, look, annuities can potentially provide income for people. And if we're going to force them into a 401k versus a pension, giving them some opportunity to derive a guaranteed source of income might be a great option. As of now, many employers steer away from them because of the negative connotations of, the Ken Fishers of the world out there saying, don't ever buy an annuity. But again, math says if you can guarantee an income, there could be value to that. The government acknowledging that and saying, look, maybe let's take away some of these liability possibilities for employers so they can offer these types of options to their employees. I think that's an interesting thing to follow and see how much more that potentially gets talked about. Yeah.
And really, the one thing you hit on too about, raising the age that you can contribute to these, there's such a large portion of the population that has not saved enough. And a lot of them are going to be in a situation where they have to work longer if they are able to. And so if they're going to work longer, why not let them keep contributing to their plan so that they have a better shot at a successful retirement?
Right.
It's just common sense.
Now, you might say, well, how are they going to do this? So some of these are very tax-friendly laws that they're proposing. Well, the one way they're going to pay for it is they're going to take away the stretch IRA provision. Now, if you're not familiar with this, probably doesn't matter to you, but many people have done a lot of planning around this stretch concept. And what it basically says is, depending on how you take IRAs distribution when you die, so when you die and you leave your IRA to people, there are ways to stretch out that distribution over multiple generations, which can save a ton in taxes and can also create really a legacy of income to, even your grandchildren. That's something that Congress is saying we need to get rid of that. We need to make it when somebody passes away, if they're not leaving it to their spouse, it's getting taxed. And that's where they're going to kind of make up for some of the taxes they're going to be missing out by delaying required minimum distributions and extending contribution ages.
Yeah, and I think this particular proposal shows that you would have 10 years to distribute the IRA after a person is deceased. So that still gives you a fair amount of time that you don't have to take the tax bite all at once, but it doesn't have it go in perpetuity a long time.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah. I always have trouble with that word. I should just not use it on the radio. So, the government's got to get their tax bite out of it eventually. And if it goes to a young grandchild and it's stretched out for another 70 years, that's not really what the program was meant to do either.
Well, and stretch IRAs are used by a small portion of the population. RMDs are faced by everyone.
Yep.
So if we're going to decide which one of those, gets adjusted, adjusting the required minimum distribution law is really a more even way of making changes to the retirement bill than the stretch IRA concept is. One other thing they've talked about that I love a lot is when you're receiving your 401k statement, requiring some type of calculation of what you've accumulated. What would that mean to you in a monthly income if you were to retire? I think that's really important. A lot of people have a very false sense of what their account balance really means in income. And if we're taking away pensions, if we're talking about changes to Social Security, I think people deserve a checkup every year that says, hey, this is what you should probably be thinking this is going to look like. And I think 401k providers should definitely provide that.
Yeah, I think it'd be great if people are looking at that and they're 45 years old and saying, you know what, I'm behind the 8 ball here. This is where I should be, and this is where I'm in. I am. So, I need to step it up. I need to increase my contributions and so on and so forth.
Yep. So all these kind of entry points, early conversation starters, but good to see, in my opinion, that we're at least starting to have the conversation about some things that honestly have been kind of goofed up for a while. So hopefully we can see some of that make some headway that will benefit all of us when we're saving for our retirement. All right, coming up, we're going to talk about nearly 1/3 of workers have no idea about this key retirement benefit. All that and more right here on the Keep Your Money Show.
The ups and downs of a roller coaster are fun for some people, but maybe too nerve-wracking for others. The same is true for the ups and downs of the stock market. If your palms sweat when the market fluctuates, it may be time to reevaluate your investment choices. The ride to your financial future shouldn't keep you awake at night. Call the Keeping Your Money Show at 1-888-98-MONEY to get off the roller coaster and onto solid ground.